So this is the continuation of the theme into the founding of the Labour Party. The founding aims and purposes of the Labour Party as was brought into the headlines 99 years ago by the stand taken by the councillors known as the Popular Councillors in 1921. Popular councillors remain on the records, but their legacy and their record of action are forgotten by the Labour Party, and the Labour Party remains in broad control of the Tower Hamlets Council, which includes Popular. Popular as a current council ward has got one councillor, but Popular is actually represented by other wards, including Lansbury. And these wards are not represented by any councillor that appears on their behavior, appears to be even aware of the history of the Popular councillors, which is a telling indictment and is an exhibition of the total unfitness of the Labour Party to call itself anything other than an imitation of the Conservative and other distortions of democracy. The Popular councillors could not be farther from the minds of the Daily Mirror, who last night or yesterday, that is Thursday, were responsible for confecting this display. This display based on the book by Sasha Sware, the wife of Hugo Sware, who was a chum of David Cameron's, described as a member of Cameron's inner circle during Cameron's time as Prime Minister. So this promotion of this book is being treated as the most important thing in Westminster currently. Not Brexit, and most certainly not the pandemonium of the Johnson-fronted cabal. The book is being quoted or promoted by these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of quotes. One is, disloyal Johnson was classed as a liability, and Cameron is being painted as a very sexually kind of agitated person when he was walking with Sasha Sware, who is described as aged 57. She adds that when she inquired why Cameron asked him to walk in front of him, he told her, because the scent you are wearing is affecting my pheromones. It makes me want to grab you and push you into the bushes and give you one. Unsurprisingly, Cameron failed to confirm or deny this comment in an interview yesterday, that is Thursday. Now, give you one is a reference to the obscene act that Cameron felt he needed to do. And this is a colloquial expression, give you one. Now, if this is the book that the Daily Mirror is rating in its coverage as more important and hotter than the controversy around Brexit and the law breaking, or even the more important evidence of the latest failures to deal with the virus, then it needs no explanation as to how totally in the dark and the darkness the Labour Party and its supporting so-called Daily Mirror are plunged in. They could not be further from the traditions and the legacies and the values and the principles of the popular councillors who were upholding the founding values and aims of the Labour Party in their stand in 1921 when they braved and suffered, braved going to the jail, and they went to jail rather than give up on the principle. Now that is something that is worth repeating. They didn't give up and they didn't betray the principles, and they stood by the principles and they stood by their electorate. Popular, as I said, includes Lansbury. And Lansbury as a word has got the popular kind of memorials, if you like, including a statue of George Lansbury, one of the popular councillors. Lansbury, of course, became leader of the Labour Party eventually for a short period, but he is not really, in the actual evidence, he is not really credited with the main principle stand that the collective popular councillors took. But despite that, his statue is there in front of the popular bath, so-called, and in front of opposite the Crisp Street Market. And Crisp Street Market, which is situated near the Docklands Light Railway Station called All Saints, and near the All Saints Church, was the subject of a series of local kind of objections when it became targeted for degeneration by the popular Haque in collusion with the Tower Hamlets Council's corrupt planning bureaucracy. And I took part in the campaigning discussions at various points, and the result was that although some of the councillors and the councillor candidates at some stage expressed support and sympathy for the campaign against the popular Haque and Town Hamlets Council degeneration plot, when it came to coming out in the street and doing the logical thing and campaigning and protesting and marching, none of the people came forward. And these included in principle, or in terms of the expression of statement, one of the now discredited councillors called Mohammed Harun, who in the pre-2018 council election expressed support for the campaign against the popular Haque degeneration plot by association with the council. And what has happened is that despite the many reminders, none of the so-called Labour Party members has kept their word and come out in the street against the council's plot and against the popular Haque plot, and in defense of the community and the Crisp Street Market community. That shows the total betrayal of the community. and the kind of betrayal that actually stands in contrast, direct contrast to the loyalty shown by the popular councillors in 1921 to their electors. If those councillors were in place today or in 2018, they would have behaved in the exact opposite way. They would have created a big, absolutely big noise and would have stopped the Towerless Council collusion with popular Haque crooks degeneration plan. That is the difference. So the Labour Party members, whoever they may be and whatever their background in terms of ethnicity and whatever, because in 1921 the constituency was all white. There was hardly any African or Asian people in the area at that time, especially in contention. And today it is a mixed background community. People, of course, the indigenous white people are there in the majority, but there are Asian people and there are African background people from Caribbean and African actually countries. Whatever their backgrounds, whatever their ethnicity, the essential bottom line is that none of these people, whether members of the Labour Party or supporters of the Labour Party, has come out and kind of made a stand, remarkable stand, against the plot by the popular Haque and the Towerless Council planning crooks to degenerate the Christian market and the community. So if you extrapolate this particular pack of betrayal and lying and pit that against the role and behavior and the stand in principle taken by the popular councillors 99 years ago, you can see the sea of difference and the sea of degenerate difference, because democracy has been to that extent degenerated today and in the last 99 years. And the Labour Party, centrally or locally, has totally failed to refer to the principles of 1921. And in between the kind of periods where the popular council as a council was still, as a borough council was still standing up to 1965. And since 1965, when it got merged into the Towners Council, which was made in 1965 as a result of the so-called reorganization of local government or local councils in April 1965, there has been nothing. There has been no mentionable, let alone remarkable, reference to the role and the principles and the legacies of the popular councillors. And the Daily Mirror, although it's a kind of, quote, national paper, the Daily Mirror has no excuse to be giving space to the Tories in that way while hiding the fact of what is happening across the country and across London in areas like Poplar, where the local council, Labour Council, is aiding and abetting the creation of poverty and deprivation and dislocation of some of the most low income and poorest parts of the community and society, and trying to discourage enterprise by these small businesses and small income people. And that is what actually counts as conservative collusion by the Labour supporting Daily Mirror, which is saying that the conservatives are going to hit, the lockdown is going to hit in an industry worth 340 million pounds. And they're admitting that the demand for swab kits up to 4 times the capacity, says Dido Harding. An estimated 10 million people are now under some form of local lockdown as a second wave of coronavirus looms. This is the editorial opinion of the Daily Mirror. They will want to know how quickly life will return to normal and what the government is doing to help them through the crisis. And it has a go at Rees-Mogg for his carping yesterday. And it has a go at David Cameron about the food bank and poverty under his kind of regime, and so on. And it also condemns Cameron for boasting that he spent part of his lockdown helping at a food bank. And it says that Cameron fails to mention that under his government, the number of desperate food bank users soared by 1,854% to more than 1.2 million. And see, so the Tory MP, BBC stealing over 75 Ovaltine. That is what he's saying, this Tory MP they're quoting. And Paul Routledge has got a column which is talking about poverty and the failures of the finance minister, Rishi Sunak, in a kind of light-hearted way, and so on. But although the Daily Mirror talks about Cameron allowing poverty to rise stratospherically, the evidence is that the Daily Mirror doesn't care any more than Cameron does about the causes of poverty. And that is where the failure lies. The Labour Party has failed to live up to the founding aims of the Labour Party. So what is the Labour Party for? I mean, it is reduced to a kind of sideshow most of the times. In fact, all of the times that our Labour Party has been reduced to a sideshow because it hasn't got either the morality or the principle or the knowledge among its members and its MPs and its councillors to confront the causers and the causes of poverty, deprivation, hardship, inequality, and denial of basic rights, which all combined together show that the Labour Party in Britain and its kind of platforms and its vehicles like the MPs and the councillors are as removed from complying with the aims and objects of the founding kind of statements and agreements of the United Nations. And so the United Nations is marking its 75th anniversary very soon, and there is no evidence in Daily Mirror, in any of the other papers, about the existence of the United Nations, let alone the imminent anniversary. It is not a decorational anniversary. The anniversary of the United Nations is being held at a time where millions, 100 million people are destitute and have lost home, let's say. Currently, 100 million people across the world, and the world means most of Asia and Africa. 100 million people are out of their homes or lost their homes, and there is no sign. There is no sign of any of it in even the Daily Mirror or the Guardian. What the Guardian does is kind of tickles, as I have said before, tickles, tokenistically mentions things. And it does that about 15% of the truth it tells, and 85% it denies. So the world, which is, quote, led by these developed so-called countries, which include the UK, despite the internal discrepancies, denials and deprivations and distortions and depravity of its government. So if the UK is that unfit, this corrupt, this dishonest, and its media this silent, this complicit, this dishonest, what example is it? Or are they to the likes of the Times of India in India, or the Dawn in Pakistan, or the Dhaka Tribune, whatever it is? Dhaka Tribune is a new title anyway. Those are all servile followers of what they still think is the model, the British press, the British media. And the world is a poorer place when the model is so devoid of anything that warrants, entitles it to be treated as model. It's a model of badness, model of denial, model of illegality, and model of corruption and complicity with the wrongdoers. And the Labour opposition in the Mother of Parliament, even Ed Miliband had to rely on this slogan that the world refers to Westminster as the Mother of Parliament. Even he was taking part in an exposition of the total stupidity of that tag. It was not the Mother of Parliament at all. It had been reduced to something indescribably unfit for parliamentary democracy, accountability. So I come back to the question of accountability. So where is the accountability? If there is no accountability, there is no truth. And if there is no truth, there is no justice. And in all these kind of perpetrations of, the Daily Mirror perpetrates the Tory line of sub-pornographic tales being told by chums of David Cameron's, because that is what it is. Even when Cameron is depicted as a sex-crazy kind of moron, where is the rigor and where is the concern and the urgency? The media is dead. The MPs are dead. So where? The academies are in denial, let's say. Let's not call them dead, but let's call them are in denial and complicity, or in complicity with denial. So the British model, either in parliament, in academy, in the media, is not there. So what are they going to do by breaking the agreement on the exit from the EU? When they reassert Little England, what will there be? What is there? So these are the questions that should be answered by some media, but no media, no Fleet Street, no BBC, no Sky, no ITV is asking these questions. As a result of which, this edition and this program and this channel will be trying our best to offer a glimpse of what is possible and what needs to be provided. We shall be asking questions based on the rigorous understanding and study of what the evidence is. Not some kind of fantasy, but the actual evidence. And that's why we do this detailed analysis, diagnosis of Fleet Street, because that's the nearest thing materially, physically, that can be touched, physically touched and held up. This is the 10 million in lockdown disaster that Boris Johnson is presiding over, and whatever the defect in the diversionary kind of treatment of this item, the blunders, as we discussed earlier, the evidence is everywhere there is failure, even though it's dishonestly kind of time to facilitate the return to the front benches, return of Jeremy Hunt. It is still evidence. It is still based on the evidence of failure, disastrous failure. And the Guardian, which is the other paper that is supposedly kind of not hostile to the Labour Party, but not kind of slave to the Conservatives. It's not fully, supporting the Labour Party at all. And the Guardian has got a racist liar as the health editor called Sarah Bosley. Who is retailing the same line the conservative tabloids have been doing about this new magic test device. The Guardian also repeats the story from the other papers about John Lewis cutting staff bonus. And there are items about the various areas in the north of England kind of facing the lockdown very soon. And there is an admission that every river in England fails quality standard for chemical pollution. Now that is the kind of thing that should be there more of. And they say that the state schools in England suffer the biggest fall in funding since the 1980s. And there is this item about at least 1,500 breast cancer patients face long waits for surgery after mastectomy. And an anti-immigrant, anti-migrant racist firm in the USA, where it has been engaged in aiding and abetting deportation of migrants, has been given a trade contract by Boris Johnson to monitor UK border against the invasion by migrants and refugees. And there is a piece about the Tories being angry at Joe Biden making the statement about the Good Friday Agreement. And The Guardian is running it as a Tory outlet. And The Guardian has got second page, which is a second part 2, the journal. Owen Jones has got a piece there saying that we need to talk honestly about the Corbyn era to learn from it. And there is an editorial about the animal welfare. And it is celebrating Britain's lead in farm standards. And we must not give up now. And Simon Jenkins is talking about our leaders for once said no to nuclear. Simon Jenkins is an opportunist columnist for The Guardian who delivers an opportunistically timed kind of piece just to keep his spot there. These are not Owen Jones, Simon Jenkins, these are not rigorous, investigative, moral kind of journalists. These are opportunists. Like Owen Jones talks about Corbyn. I mean, that is still his kind of niche area. He is a Corbynite. And he fails to understand that even Corbyn didn't talk about the founding principles of the Labour Party. He didn't talk about the distance that exists between the role of the popular councillors and the current thousands of Labour card-carrying councillors. And so therefore, there is no trace of accountability, of telling the truth. There is ample evidence of suiting the purpose and doing the column and writing the piece and getting the check. That is what is happening with The Guardian and the Mirror. Now, what is Steve Bell offering in his cartoon? And they have got a kind of very labored kind of cartoon by Steve Bell. It's very labored indeed. It has got Boris Johnson sitting in front of Dominic Cummings, who is in the driving seat, and Cummings and Johnson are saying, they can see. It's a pun on Cummings saying that he broke the lockdown last time because he wanted to test his eyesight. So here are the roads, motorways: Cummings Estate, Barnard Castle, A1M, the northeast, closed, Sunderland, Gateshead, Newcastle. So Johnson and Cummings is saying, I can see. I mean, he's traveling to see the lockdown area, so he can see. That was his excuse, that he needed to test his eyesight, so he broke the lockdown. Essentially, there is no cartoon based on the principles that the Labour Party was founded to practice and implement. That's the theme I'm running on. And that is where the morass, the crisis, the deadlock, the failures, the incompetence, the lying, and the law breaking, all of them combine together and demand action by a Labour Party or a party that is opposed to all the wrong things and is able and willing to deliver the right things and the right solutions, the defense and the protection the society needs and the community needs and the environment needs and the animals who are being slaughtered both by criminals and also by legally licensed companies and outlets, including the so-called animal welfare charities. That is the stark reality of the rightsless, welfareless Britain that we are going through. This is 11 minutes to 12 midday GMT on Friday the 18th of September 2020. We shall be continuing